is up, my crafty friends? My name is Carrie and welcome back to my channel. Now, this is part 2 of our fairy garden themed collaboration. We are still sprinkling that fairy dust all over the place because y'all, there's a whole lot of crazy going on in the world. So we really hope that you are enjoying this collaboration that we have planned for you. Now, in case you missed the very first video in this collab, I'll put a link to that video down below. I made the cutest little mushroom fairy house you've ever seen in your life, and it was lighted, but it was a little bit involved. So I had a lot of people reach out to me and tell me they loved the mushroom house, but they felt a little intimidated. They didn't think it was something that they could recreate for themselves. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna step back. I'm gonna kind of start with the basics, and I'm going to give you a beginner's guide and teach you how to make a fairy house using barely any sculpting at all. I mean, honestly, if you can cover a jar, you can totally make this fairy house. Just like part 1, I'm collabing with 2 of my favorite girls on YouTube, and that is Sweet Urban Rose and Terrarium and Crafts. And y'all, if you have not checked out their channels, you are definitely going to want to hop over there. I'll put a link to their channels down below so you can definitely check them out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up because that would mean the world to me. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and turn on all your notifications. That way, when part 3 of our fairy collab comes out, you're going to get a notification and you can join me as we live chat. Now, after you finish watching my video, be sure to head on over to my girls' channels and show them some love too, because I know they will truly appreciate it. That's enough talking, y'all. Let's start making a fairy house.
Okay, y'all, so let's take a look at what we're going to be using. Now, I've got a coconut oil jar here, but you can use a peanut butter jar or any other jar you've got laying around your home. Any clear jar will do. Now, I'm also going to use this fairy house that I picked up from Dollar Tree. This is from their fairy collection, but feel free to pick up one from Dollar General or use any of the other ones they do have available at Dollar Tree. Now, you can see I did drop mine as I was taking it out of the bag, so it does have a hole in it, but no worries because it's going to be covered up and you're not even going to see that. Now, I also picked up this stand from Dollar Tree. This is totally optional. You don't have to use this, but I just really like the way the house looks when it's sitting on top of it. I used it whenever I did my mushroom, and I think it's just adorable. So to make sure I stay inside the lines of my little stand, I do have a clear plastic sleeve with my box drawn in it so that I know exactly where it needs to stop. Okay, so let's go ahead and mark our house onto our jar. To do that, I'm just going to use a Sharpie. I'm just going to outline around it, and then I'm going to take my utility knife and very, very, very carefully cut out. Now, this does take some effort, but with a little bit of time and lots of caution, I was able to cut out this plastic. Now, if I had a hot knife, this would obviously go a lot faster, but I did not. So I just carefully used my X-Acto knife and my utility knife and ended up trimming around it with my scissors too. You can see all the little pieces I had to trim off here, but I wanted to make sure that it was a super snug fit. And I did go back and trim off some of it with my X-Acto knife. So I've got all my little pieces here. Just be careful to take good care and dispose of those because you don't want to get cut on anything. Okay, so now our house just sits perfectly inside our little clear jar. And I also cut off the bottom here, so that rounded part is gone. I just have a straight cut across that. And now my jar, my little house just slides right into my jar. I need a little bit of help here. So I'm just going to slide one of my tools in there, and then my house, you can see, sits halfway in that jar. See, I told you you won't even see that part where I dropped it. Okay, let's make sure that it's nice and snug. And once it is, one last final inspection to make sure it fits inside our stand, and yay, it fits perfect. Okay, so now we're going to grab our Sure Bonder hot glue gun with those tough sticks, and we are going to just hot glue this little house inside our jar. This is a huge time saver. You can sculpt your own house, but you know, when you want something cute and you don't have a lot of sculpting skills, this is the perfect thing to use. It may be a little bit of cheating, but I don't care. I think it's adorable. Okay, so now that my glue is all cooled off, there's one last thing I need to do before I can start sculpting, and that is to put a hole in the back of my jar because y'all, I'm gonna light this baby up. I'm gonna put fairy lights in the back here, and the easiest way to do that is going to be to use my glue gun. Now, the Sure Bonder hot glue gun does not get hot on the tip, so that one will not work. So I'm just gonna pick up this old glue gun that I had laying around, and I'm going to burn my hole in my plastic. It does take a little bit of force and a little bit of effort, but it does work. I am going to plug that hole with a dowel just so it doesn't get caught up with my clay. And now we are ready to sculpt. So I keep my clay inside this airtight container, and that way it's not going to dry out. Now I picked up this Das from Michael's, but feel free to pick some up from Amazon or any other craft supply store. So we're just going to pinch off a little bit. Now I did have this clay left over from the mushroom project, and if you missed that mushroom project, I'll put a link to that down below because it turned out super cute. So now I'm just taking a slab of my clay and patting it down with my hands and just totally covering this whole jar with the clay. Now don't try to get too into it being perfect. It's a tree after all, so you want to make sure that it is very textured, but you do need the whole jar to be covered. So we're just going to go all the way around our house, and also the top. You want to make sure you get that top covered as well. And like I said, don't worry about it. Don't fuss too much about it being perfect because you want that texture. That's going to make for a super interesting tree. Now, because I am going to make the bark appear like it's peeling off of the tree, I'm going to roll out this extra little piece of clay to attach to the top. I want that to be a little bit thicker. And I'm just going to go back in with my little knife from my tool set from Arteza. And now I'm going to pinch the top with my fingers. And taking this almost like a little knife tool from my Arteza set of sculpting tools, that's going to allow me to sort of pinch that top. And now I'm texturizing the rings with my little silicone tool. And because a straight up and down tree is so boring, I'm going to come back in and add some little roots and also a little more clay to the bottom, just so it's not just straight up and down. I want the bottom to kind of flare out a little bit, and I think the roots added to the bottom just add lots of interest and texture. So again, just using my tools from my Arteza clay set makes this so much easier than the paring knife that I used to use. Okay, so now I'm going to cut out a hole. Now, because I am going to be making my lights inside, I want as much light to show through as I can. So I thought it would be super cute to just add in a little broken off branch. And now I'm going to blend everything together. And it's time to cover up those holes from where I dropped my house earlier. Just shoving the clay down inside that totally covers it up, and I'm going to repaint this anyway, so it's going to blend it seamlessly. So I'm going to cut a little window here in the side, and I'm also going to cut 2 windows in the back. I really want lots of light to show through. I'm going to be using those same On For You lights that I used in the mushroom house because I like the fact that I can change from warm to cool lights with the flick of a switch. Okay, now I do want to make sure that everything stays nice and wet and moist. That way it doesn't dry out, and it makes texturing so much easier. So I'm picking up this little metal tool that kind of looks like a brush, and I just want to texturize everything before I start adding in my tree bark. So now I'm going to pick up this little kind of like pencil shaped tool, and now I'm going to add in that tree bark, and it's just a matter of pulling your tool through your clay, kind of varying your hand. Some of it's light, some of it is you have a lighter touch, some of it you have a heavier touch, but just adding in all of that nice texture to give that tree bark a realistic look. And I'm just pulling up and down. And now I'm going to pick up this sharper tool. I don't know what this tool is called, but it is a little bit sharp. It's kind of pointed on the end, and it's perfect to add in that broken texture for this tree branch. And I'm just going to slice off some little pieces here just to give it a realistic touch. Okay, it's looking good. So now let's just finish up texturizing this tree with our little pencil shape tool, and we can move on to the next step. So now I want the top, like I said, to look like the bark is coming off. So I'm just putting my hand up to the top and pushing my clay against with my pencil tool, and that kind of makes it have that fluted, flared out look. Kind of makes the bark appear like it's coming away from the tree. I love it. So now I'm just going to roll out a little more clay here. And this is going to be the mushroom that's going to cover up the top of my window. I just think those little mushrooms are just absolutely adorable. And just using my fingers here and pushing my top of my hole to kind of hollow out the inside of this mushroom cap. And now flaring it out with my fingers, adding in a little water to smooth it down, and also the water will help it to attach to itself. Now the best way to make your clay attach is with a tiny bit of water. It does not take much. If you put too much water, it will not stick. It'll actually just slide around. So less is more. Just using my little pencil tool here to sort of blend those two together. The light is going to look so cute coming through this little mushroom window. Okay, so now I want to add in some more details to my windows, and I'm going to put a little wood window sill here. Just using my tools to texturize it. And I'm using a combination of that sharp pointed tool as well as my pencil shaped tool because I want some pieces that are more deep than others, and using both of these tools kind of helps to do that. So now we're going to add in some little mushroom steps here. I want my little fairy house to have a patio, and what better way to put steps on it than with these little mushrooms. I have no idea what these little mushrooms are called, but you know the mushrooms I'm talking about that kind of grow up the sides of trees. I'm just patting out this like I would a biscuit and attaching it with just a tiny bit of water. And pulling the edge a little bit thin so that it flares out. Okay. Now I want to add in a little bit of grass. It kind of looks naked down here at the bottom of this house, and it just looked like it needed something else. So I thought, well, let's just put a little bit of grass down here at the bottom. And again, just using my tool to sort of texture and pull that grass up. Okay, let's add in a few little stepping stones here to get to our doorway. And now we're going to add in some mushrooms to the side of our house. I'm just rolling out a little piece of clay, and again using that same technique that we did to for the mushroom that was over our window, and I'm going to put these two little mushroom caps on the side of the house. Okay, our house is all done, y'all. This really was a fast sculpt. It took no tin foil at all, so that's why this house is the perfect house if you are a beginner and you want to try your first fairy house. Look at the details of those steps. I cannot wait to get this all painted. Okay, so now the last thing I need to do before I paint is going to add in this detail over the top, and I just decided to put in a little mushroom cap over the top for the door light too. So to get started painting, I'm going to mix in a combination of brown paint and yellow paint, and I'm not mixing these totally in together because I kind of like the fact that it has lights and darks in it. So I don't want to totally paint it all one color. I want it to have that depth and dimension. So by just mixing it on my plate as I go, that's going to ensure that I have that. And I will be honest, because it is so textured, you do have to use a fairly heavy touch when you paint inside this textured bark. You want to make sure you use a heavy brush too. It's going to take a little bit of pressure to get down in all of those little grooves. We don't want any white showing through. Okay, we are almost done, y'all. Phew, that was a lot of work. Okay, now I'm going to add in a little bit of white, and I want my bark to be a little bit lighter than what it is, but I wanted the dark color to be painted on first. So I'm just going to mix in a little bit of white with that brown that we've already used, and that's going to give me sort of like a mocha color. And I'm going to very lightly, I'm not going to get back in the grooves, I just want to go over the top part of the bark. And I'm also going to paint the top part of the bark that's separating from the tree this lighter color. I'm going to add in a little bit of yellow and white and make sort of a creamy light yellow. And sorry for the glare, y'all, the sun was beaming in Florida. So now I'm going to mix a little bit of white with that darker brown and paint underneath my windows for my window sills, as well as that little piece above the door. And of course, y'all know my door has got to be turquoise. This is not the same turquoise color that I use in my mushroom house. This is a different shade of turquoise. So now let's mix up a little bit of brown and a little bit of white, and I'm going to make a lighter mocha color, and I'm going to paint my mushrooms that are going up the sides for my steps, as well as my mushroom stems on the side of the house. It's sort of like a greasy color, kind of a brownish grayish shade. Now I'm going to add a little bit more gray because I do want the undersides of this to be a little bit darker than the tops of it. So just adding in a little bit of gray will help make that darker. And now adding in a little bit of darker brown just to give it some low lights. Just touching the edges. Okay, so now I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint and plaster and add a little bit of water to that. And I just want to whitewash above my window, above my door, and also on my window sills. Touching up the gray bricks that were already on our little house here, and then painting in the steps that we added. Y'all, this is coming together so cute. I did have to end up putting 3 coats over my door. This was not an Arteza color, this was a Craft Mark color. Okay, so now it's time to paint our red mushrooms. This is just the straight red that was in my Arteza colors. And now I'm going to add in a little bit of brown just to give it a rusty red look to these sides. I don't want everything to be the same shade. Okay, let's paint underneath here with a little bit of our greasy color. Okay, now moving on to one of our last steps. I'm going to mix in some green and some lime green and some yellow. And I'm going to start off just painting the clay grass that we added in earlier. I'm also going to use the same combination of colors and just dabbing on those colors to touch up the top of my house too. That way all of these are going to blend in together. You're not going to see what I sculpted and what was already part of the house. Now it's time to paint our little white spots on our mushrooms. And I'm going to add in some highlights into my mushroom steps as well. As a finishing touch, I'm watering down some of my brown paint and just washing it over the top of this just to sort of give it that aged and antiqued look. Add in my little doorknobs, and y'all, our little house is done. Look how precious it is. You would never know that this actually started off as a Dollar Tree house and a peanut butter jar. Isn't this adorable? I absolutely love it. The only thing that's left to do now is to put our lights in the back of our house. Now, I did paint the back of my little light here brown so that it blends in, and I'm just going to hot glue this to the back of my house. You can see it was white, and I just painted it with my Arteza brown paint. Let's shove our lights inside our hole and glue our light down to the back. And y'all, here it is. Our little lighted fairy house is done. So cute. Okay, y'all, here's our finished house, and the last thing that we need to do before I can call this done is to seal it with our triple thick clear glaze from Krylon, because that's going to make sure that our fairy house is nice and protected. Okay, y'all, here are both of our fairy houses. Are they not the cutest thing you've ever seen? Using those Dollar Tree houses saves so much time, and it really does help you if you're not comfortable with your sculpting skills. That does it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, because that will mean the world to me. And until next time, happy DIYing, y'all.